Hello, hello, and welcome to the Everyday Fi podcast. Today I'm going to be talking to my buddy Mitch. You probably heard him in episode 10, where we were talking about the Fire in Vegas event in April, but I wanted to bring him on again to talk about his specific Fi journey. And this is an amazing episode for anybody who's looking to learn how to reach financial independence in less than 2 decades. And also how to take a summer sabbatical and potentially return back to work. This episode's going to be great. We talk about that. We talk about his sabbatical, the travel. We talk about our podcasts and why we started them. And we also talk about things like bougie French press coffee, which is really fun. I love French press coffee, and so does he. So tune in to learn his story and to see if you can pick up any tips and tricks for yourself. All right. Thanks for joining me today. I am here with my buddy Mitch, and Mitch and I know each other from the Fire in Vegas event that happened back in April. And so we're going to just be like, shooting the crap and, acting like we're BFFs because we know each other pretty well. I was on his podcast. You probably just heard that episode because I released it not too long ago. And so, now he's on my podcast interviewing with me. And so, Mitch, how are you doing? What's up?
Life is good. It's been a crazy 2 months since I met you. It's been basically exactly 2 months. I think the event started on April 5th and we're recording this on June 5th. So it's been fun watching you get started and get rolling. And for those that maybe didn't catch it in the episode, you were the first guest on my show, which was a lot of fun. And I think it's going to stay the most downloaded and listened to episode by a long shot. And so far it is. So congrats us on that.
That's amazing. That makes me feel really good. And for you guys who don't know, this is Mitch from the MyFICapsule podcast. Of course, I'll be putting a link to his show in the show notes. But you should take a listen. It's really good. And we kind of started our podcast at the same time. So we're both learning and growing together as separate podcast hosts. But I'm trying to convince him to be a co-host with me someday. So if you guys leave comments on the page for this episode, you should try and convince him too. All right, Mitch, tell us about yourself a little bit. Let's do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Mitch. I'm from Minnesota. I grew up in the suburbs just outside of St. Paul. Now I live on the south side. So for anybody who's from the area, I went from being a North Metro person to what we call the other side of the river. And it's, to me, the superior place to live. But we live in a normal suburban neighborhood, normal people houses, as I like to call them. And my wife and I have been together. We're coming up on 14 years married in just a couple of weeks. And so we've been together for, I think, just over 16. We have a 7-year-old son. It was his last day of first grade today. He came home all geeked out about first grade being over. And he's looking forward to a big trip that we have coming up, which I'm sure we'll share a little bit about. And then from a job and career standpoint, I started out in big box retail, 17 years ago, and was successful in sales and management there, and then moved into the building maintenance industry. I just kind of stumbled into the right place, right time, came in as account manager in the building maintenance space, doing sales, doing management, doing people leadership, and just really helped build this company to what turns out to be about 27 times its size in a 15, 16-year stretch. And as Megan knows, I just exited that company. My last day is actually tomorrow. And then I'm going on a mini retirement sabbatical, whatever you want to call it. And when I return, I'm going to go back to working for the company just in a different capacity. So that's a bit about me in a broad sense. There's a whole lot more to Mitch, but that's what I'll give you for now.
That's really good. And congratulations on quitting tomorrow. I'm sure you're really excited. And I guess I'm going to ask you a fun question. What's going to be like your last act at the company? I guess you're going back, but still, what's going to be like your last act? Have you thought about what like your last words are going to be or anything like that?
Well, it's funny you say that. I actually sent my goodbye email to my, whatever it is, 35 employees that worked under me until tomorrow. And I've transferred all my responsibilities to other people already. So I'm really just a formality at this point. But it's funny you ask that. What's weird is very unceremoniously, I just went to my last leadership meeting today, provided some support and some guidance to my executive team that's now taking the reins and running the place. And then I just kind of quietly walked downstairs. I packed up my desk, and my desk is a lot like Michael Scott's. And I'm not kidding. It's like, it's toys, it's weird decorations. There's an actual Michael Scott quote and photo. And I put it in my car, and then I said goodbye to one person, got a hug because I knew I wasn't going to see her again until after I get back. And then I just drove away. And that was that. So there's really nothing exciting about that. And it's probably, like you said, it's a lot because I am coming back in the fall. I'm just going from working for an independently owned location that I owned a piece of to now I'm going to work for the Big Bad Wolf, the corporate office, to help support people that want to turn their business into what I turned mine into over a 16-year stretch.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you kind of like Irish goodbye. That's what I think you call that. I like it.
Yeah.
That's like a pro move right there. So for anybody who's quitting their job, just walk out without saying goodbye, except for one person.
Michael
Awesome.
Scott did that. He told everyone that tomorrow was his last day, but then it was actually today. And that's a good little trick.
I love that. That's great. And for anybody who doesn't know, who might be younger, Michael Scott is from The Office.
And it's having a major comeback after its streaming potential. So
yeah. For sure. Really silly show. That has actually it's still very relevant today. Just side note, I watched that and then Office Space, which came out, I think, in 1998 or something like that. And I'm like, why is the working world exactly the same as the 90s? What the heck is happening? Because everything the main character in that movie was feeling, I was like, oh my God, I'm feeling that way. And yeah, so if any of you youngins out there have not seen the show or that movie, then you should watch it because it's still relevant to today. It totally is. So, all right, Mitch, let's talk about your financial independence journey. So how did you come to know about the financial independence movement? Like, what brought you here?
Yeah, I shared the story on another podcast I recorded just about a week ago with a high school friend who happens to have a financial podcast. And I originally stumbled into it because I needed hope. I had made a mess with my finances between 18 and 21 and had a pile of debt between some credit cards, way too expensive car, student loans. And I just was living as though I was rich because I made more money than what I'd seen my mom make, as an example. And so I thought, well, I must be killing it. And so I spent it all and then some. And then one day I couldn't pay all the minimums on everything that was due. And I was very upside down very, very fast. And so I was driving home from my girlfriend's house, now wife, and heard Dave Ramsey on the radio. I didn't know it was him. I just heard this couple. They were normal people, maybe everyday people, perhaps, telling their story. And man, they just were similar incomes as what I had, yet they just gotten done talking about getting out of debt. And then they got to do their debt-free scream, and I was just blown away, motivated by it. And eventually the radio show went to commercial, but he said, you can buy my book in anywhere you can find books. And I saw a 24-hour Walmart, pulled over, drove in, bought it at 11 o'clock at night, went home, read the first 3-4 chapters of the book, and went to bed and got up the next day and started that journey. And that's where it began. And then later on, I was looking into real estate and laundromats. I found bigger pockets and eventually was really fixated and focused on real estate and bought my first rental property. And then one day, I told you this, I was farming, driving tractor for my father-in-law, listening to Tim Ferriss. And he introduced his podcast that day saying, this is going to be the most anticipated guest that we have had requested across anyone they've ever asked us to have. And I'm expecting it to be like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. And it turns out to be Mr. Money Mustache. And I listened to the episode. I was blown away. I rewound it. I listened to it again. And I called my wife and said, this is it. I figured it out. Now I know what we're doing. So that was all, 10, 11 years ago at this point. And the rest is history.
And so how old were you when you found that Mr. Money Mustache episode?
I'm going to guess 27. I'm not 100% sure. It might have been 30, somewhere in that range. Because again, it's kind of mixed up for me because I was already looking into passive income in a different way. I just thought real estate and laundromats because I grew up in rental homes and I always thought we were making somebody else rich. My uncle owned like 9 or 10 rental houses at one point and he always did very well. So I thought that must work. And then we did our laundry at laundromats a lot of times because I grew up in apartments and you just feed those quarters in there. And I just thought, man, we're making somebody rich. I got to own one of these someday. And so that's where my head went for passive income. And I never even considered, the stock market being something that could be your everyday path to financial freedom and just somehow stumbled into it, like I said, through Tim Ferriss. So
feeding quarters into the laundromat machine reminds me of Tori Dunlap's story that she likes to tell on podcasts where when she was a little girl, her dad set her up with, I think they were like little candy machines that you put in like car washes and stuff. And so people would put quarters in and they'd get like a handful of like little snack candy things. And that was her first business. I don't remember how old she was, but she was like 10 or something. And she said that that was what kind of lit the fire in her to be, financially savvy and start her own business and things like that. So if you guys don't know Tori Dunlap, she's the founder of her first 100K, and she saved $100,000 by the time she was 25. And now I believe she's like 28 and owns like a multi-million-dollar business and is really awesome and has a book out called Financial Feminism. So she's pretty awesome. So I guess like adopting that mindset of I want to make passive income on like sticking quarters into things is where it's at.
Yeah, she was just on ChooseFI this week as well. I wish I knew the exact episode number, but she was just on it this week. And another kind of old school name in the personal finance space that may not be as familiar is a guy named Pat Flynn. And Pat Flynn also started with a gumball machine or a vending machine. I forget which it was, but I remember hearing him on a podcast way back, probably in that same time frame when I was 26 to 28 years old.
Yeah. And I think that that's a cool idea for kids even today, because you still see those around. Like people love to go get gumballs out of those things or little toys out of those things. So I think it's such an interesting idea to get kids kind of involved in running a business, as it were, and teaching them those kind of values. So I think it's cool. I might do that with my kids. So awesome. So one of the reasons why I asked about how old you were when you found Mr. Money Mustache is because I wanted to show people like the timeline it takes to reach financial independence is really not as long as you think it is. And you can oftentimes reach it within like a decade or at least less than 2 decades versus, a lot of times people work 40 years until they can retire. And even then they're retiring and having to take their Social Security right away because they don't have enough. So following this movement, it goes to show you that you can do it pretty quickly if you adopt some of the themes that we present here with like the high savings rates and the, spending less and kind of being more thoughtful about what you spend money on and, being more thoughtful about your values and spending on your values and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why I brought that up. But I also wanted to know just like what, I guess, is your why of FI and like what drew you to wanting to pursue financial independence? Like what was that innate need inside you and what drove it?
Yeah, I'll take a small step back and then a big spring forward. So the small step back is I was on the path to FI just from having found Dave Ramsey, but I didn't quite know it. We had been saving more than his 10, 15, 20% recommendation. We were probably at that like 25 to 30, 35%. It was just because we kept making more money and we didn't spend it all. And it was just that simple. But for me, the deep rooted why is really funny. When I go way back to my middle school, high school years, this never showed up in my academics, but I always said to myself and even said outwardly to, family, friends, whatever, that I didn't want to live the way that I grew up. And I had a great upbringing from the fact that I lived in a home that was warm and I was loved and whatever, but we didn't have money and our lights got shut off and things like that happened. That was my everyday life. But I never wanted to be that way or live that way. And so I just always wanted to work a little bit harder and a little bit smarter than the person next to me. And once I realized precisely how attainable that was, which really happened between that 21-year-old wake up call and I got married at 24, I was completely debt free, got married, and my wife and I immediately paid off about half to 2/3 of her debt, like a week after our honeymoon. It was a really cool place to be. And I knew it was firmly my future. And so I just knew I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be completely content. And I wanted money to be something I never had to think about. And I used to identify that or quantify that as a certain earnings amount. And then somewhere once I found the financial independence, the aha went off when I just realized it is as simple as the 25x, give or take. And boom, that's it. It's over. You won the game of life at whatever age. And so that's what kind of sucked me in and drew me in and made me want to pursue it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And your wife is very lucky to have you, to have you help her pay off her debt. I myself am still paying off my student loans, but I'm just doing it because the interest rate is so low and it just makes no sense to pay them off early. Personally, I'm not a huge Dave Ramsey person. I don't agree with like pay off your debt right away. So I just let it slide and put the rest in the stock market. But I mean, once those get paid off, it's going to feel so good.
Yeah, I want to mention a couple of things. The reason my wife and I were able to pay off her debt so quickly wasn't necessarily that I just showed up and paid off her debt. It was because when you put the whole DINK concept together, dual incomes, no kids, we had two incomes. We both had good incomes. There's no hiding. Mine was the stronger of the two incomes. But when we got married, we used her credit because mine was a hot mess. We used her credit to buy the home. And thus we were able to buy a home that we could own for far cheaper than what we would have paid in rent. So if it was just up to me, that never would have happened. But because she had great credit, we were able to pull that off. And then on top of that, we were able to simultaneously start investing through her 401k, which I never had a 401k until, I think 32 years old is the first time I've ever had access to a 401k. And so we were doing investing through her income and then accelerated debt payoff as a combination of mine plus the resources we brought by pooling things together.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for clarifying that. And I don't feel bad. I didn't have a 401k until I was 31. So I'm with you on that. I was in the liberal arts field and doing all these part-time jobs like cobbled together into 40 hours a week. And yeah, they don't offer retirement plans. I worked at a gallery in New York City where it was technically full-time, but I had to convince them to get like an IRA for us, but they had no match, no nothing. And they were like, sure, you can do an IRA, whatever you want to do. So that's all I had. So I'm with you there. That's like the first time I ever had something that felt like I could actually contribute more than just, $5,000 a year. So yeah. Okay. So what does reaching FI look like for you? What is that post-FI life going to be like for you?
So this evolution continues to do just that, evolve. So for me, I'm looking for what is lovingly referred to as fat FI and possibly very fat FI, because I am in a situation currently where when I finish my exit from my company, I do have a stock equity event that I'll be realizing. And so for clarity's sake, my household right now, we're well past half FI, well past that. But this is going to put us all the way to definitely financially independent or incredibly close. The issue is there's taxes on my stock exit, and it's going to be something that just has to resolve itself before I know. But in any case, it just gets me to a FI to where would I never have to work again? Sure, but not the lifestyle that I'm seeking. So for me, it's continuing to work for long enough. I really want to hit a 3% safe withdrawal rate at a bare minimum. And then after that, I really got to figure out what I'm going to want to do with my time. And it may still be working in some capacity, but I love the thoughts of just being able to work a little bit more slowly, take a little bit more time, take longer walks, sip coffee a little bit more slowly in the morning. And these are a lot of things that I'm kind of play testing right now because I've stepped way back from my role because I gave away most of my responsibilities. So I'm kind of living it out right now. I'm not bored. I'm definitely not bored. I have work to do and I have things to do, but it's really just slowing things down and being able to just do whatever it is that we want to do. And I almost wish we were doing this interview 3 months from now because it'll be after I'm back from the most, quintessential trip that people seem to want to make in life at some point. If you are at all in my lifestyle, which is we're taking a camper across the country and going to state parks and national parks and just living a very simple and simplified nature life for some time. And I'm very curious to see where my brain goes after that 3-month journey is over. So I feel like I've been dodging this question for months and I'm probably going to continue to semi dodge it. So you're just going to have to deal with it. But ask away, make me be more specific if you wish.
Well, yeah. So I actually am like furiously writing down a bunch of things I want to ask you. So, okay. So one thing I want you to talk about is like how you came to taking this sabbatical. Like, why did you decide that you wanted to take it? How did you approach your boss with it and convince them to let you take it? How long is it going to be? And then finally, why are you going back to work afterwards if you have reached financial independence? And I can repeat any of those questions for you, of course.
Yeah, we may have to. So first, why did I decide I wanted to do this? The easy answer is burnout, but I don't think it's the right answer. I think if you've ever read the book, if anybody's in the business world and has ever read the book or is familiar with Good to Great, a really common theme in that book is getting the right person in your company and then getting them into the right seat. And what's interesting is I've always just chased the money, and the money led me up the ladder to where I went from an account manager to a director to a VP to more of like a senior VP type role to an operating partner, part owner of the business. And it took me getting all the way to that chair to realize, I don't like leading people at this level where I'm expecting them to drive and achieve these huge results. And whenever they have a bad day, they dump it all on me. And I don't think this is what leadership has to be, but I once heard the sentiment that leadership is sometimes letting people down at a rate that they can tolerate. And that doesn't identify with me and my soul. And so how I got to this point is I started to recognize that. And I quite honestly wondered what the heck is wrong with me. And you know this portion of the story very well. And I know you're going to smile and you're going to be on mute. Nobody's going to hear it, but there it is. I gave in. I said, I got to find a therapist and find out what the heck is wrong with this human, because I have what everybody wants. I make a lot of money. I sit in a great chair. I am my own boss. I talk to my actual boss, who's the CEO, an hour and a half a month. And I run a company and everybody works for me and it should be great. But it wasn't fitting my mindset any longer. It wasn't fitting my heart, my soul, whatever. I worked through that for 12 to 18 months. And my therapist helped me get all the way to the finish line, which was 2 months ago, month and a half ago. And to answer your next question, how did I do it? Well, I didn't ask. I quit. I literally quit because of financial independence. I quit. And I said, I'm going to do this with my family. I know it's going to sound crazy. I'm giving you a 50-day notice. I'll be available to you when I come back. But I've been working on putting pieces in place for a long time for this to be as smooth as possible for everyone here. And I think you're going to be fine. It's not like everything's just going to be easy, but I think you'll be fine. And if you need me, I'll be here when I get back. My hope is that we can work something out. I'd love to work for the corporate office in a different capacity on the other side if we can make something work. And that's essentially the end of the story. Now, I think I answered most of your questions. I'm going to let you chime in and tell me if I missed something.
Yeah. So how long is your sabbatical going to be? And then also, why are you coming back to work? Like, why did you want to switch to a different capacity at the company rather than just quit altogether?
So probably a 3-part answer. How long is a sabbatical? It happens to be exactly 3 months. So I'm leaving on, well, it's actually a little more than 3 months, but I'm leaving on June 10th to begin my mega trip across the northwestern portion of the country. And I return to work for my first day on September 9th. So we're going to be living out of a camper from June 10th all the way through, I think it's August 24th. And then we got to get back in time because the Minnesota State Fair is like the biggest state fair in the country. It's a huge deal. But more importantly, Ludacris and T-Pain are having a concert and we will be going to said concert. So we're going to go live out our millennial life at that event, which we're super excited about. Now, why did I go back to work? It goes back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier. I am pursuing a very luxurious version of FI. I don't want to be ramen noodle FI. I'm not interested in, I technically am at that barista FI world, right? So I could go work at Starbucks and just get by, or I could go and do what I'm great at without all the stress, without all the headache, without the weight of the world on my shoulders that I felt like I've had for the last 3 years. And instead, this is where the third part comes in. This is why I'm going back to do what I'm going to do. I knew that the audience would receive me very, very well. And so when we made this announcement to the entire system, there's 100 franchises. I run the 4th largest one. That means 96 people want to be me. Okay. 96 people want to be where I am. And so when someone like me steps out of running this business and says, hey, I'm available to you to be a resource, to help you, to coach you, to give you the playbook so you can hear it from someone who's actually done it instead of people that work for the franchise company that live in theory world and have heard about how you do it from other people, but they've never lived it out. And that's what turned out to be the case. We sent a message out and I've gotten 80 emails, people just geeked out, cannot believe it. And I knew I'd be welcomed and it would go, I knew it would go the way that it's going. It would be a warm welcome. I'd be very wanted and I'm going to be able to help people in a way where I get nothing in return except a W-2 paycheck, where before it was my paycheck, my commission, my bonuses, my stock equity, all of that. Right now it's just, I get a paycheck. Yes. But man, I get to help change whatever they need change in their life. And I don't get anything directly for it other than just a steady and consistent paycheck. And it's going to help me get to that 3% safe withdrawal rate. And then from there, you can ask me if I'm living out 1 year syndrome. So talk to me in like 3 years and we'll cover that subject.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, how long is it going to take to get to that 3%? Do you think with this new position that you're in?
It may be as little as a year. It might be 2 years. It really depends on what the stock market does. So I don't know if we're going to get to investing topics deeply, but I invest in individual single family real estate. So I own a couple of rental properties. I also invest in what are called multifamily syndications, where my money is tied up in these large apartment complexes that are out of state, run by somebody else. And I have an equity event that's coming, and some of that money is going to go probably into some more multifamily. I have another opportunity to invest in some businesses with the same group of people, but it's going to require me to look a little more deeply into it and go fly out there. All that to say, between those factors and whatever the stock market does, because all of my stock market money is 100% VTI or VTSAX or the equivalent in Fidelity or wherever, depending on where it's brokered. So it's really just, what do those funds do? How well does my real estate portfolio perform? And it honestly, a year is not out of reach. 3 to 4 is probably the more honest answer.
Okay. So if you are able to get good returns within a year and then you're working another year, then I'll call you out for the 1 more year syndrome. But it sounds like you have a good plan at this point. So also, just backing up a little bit to define a term for people, just in case they don't know what BaristaFi is. BaristaFi is a type of ChooseFI, from what I understand, where you save up to a point where your retirement accounts have enough in them that once they grow to the age where you would normally retire at 65, you'll have enough to live off of that after 65 once you start pulling from them. I think it's even 59 and a half if you want to use that age. And during that time, your expenses are so low that you can go and work at a coffee shop like Starbucks or whatever, or you can work at like a grocery store or REI or something. It's basically a type of ChooseFI that's specific to working as a barista. So just wanted to define that for people. I've never heard of Ramen Fi before, but I'm sure there are people in the community who are like that. I think there's one that's like early retirement extreme, that guy who lives on like $7,000 a year. That's a little much. Yeah. I'll link him in the show notes anyway, so people can go and check him out. But when I looked into him, I was like, ooh, no, that's not for me. So
for what it's worth, I probably misused BaristaFi in my capacity, because I'm BaristaFi to like 3 years from now. If I could just go and work there and cover some expenses and use the cash cushion that I currently have built. I've been building up a cash cushion because I didn't know how long I was going to be out of work once I told them I was going to be done. So I'm currently sitting on like 1.5 years, 2 years worth of cash that I'm now going to need to invest, which I will do, but I'm not in a rush, and I will deal with it when I return in September. But that's essentially what I meant, is I could earn just enough to get by and let the nest egg do its thing. And I would truly be surprised if we're not there in 3 years. So, but anyway, we can move past that.
Yeah, no, but that's an awesome goal. And 3 years is nothing. I mean, you'll be like 40, right? I mean, that's so early.
41.
Yeah, that's retiring quite early. So congratulations. And we will bring you back on after your sabbatical and after the concert. Yeah, and we'll talk to you about like how the sabbatical went, how the new job's going, and how the fair went, everything. So don't worry, we'll bring you back. Okay, so we just talked about your strategies for reaching financial independence. So thank you for doing that. And I want to know how the podcast fits into that. Like, is this just a passion project that you're doing? What motivated you to start it? And is it going to be something that you monetize and do post-fi, or do you just want to keep it as a passion project?
So I started the project for a couple of reasons. During COVID, everybody's talking about, we're all going to die. What could all go wrong, right? And I was not incredibly terrified that I was going to die, but you started hearing these things and it kind of gets you thinking. And so I'd always been interested in either doing a podcast, writing a book, starting a blog, something. And I'm not a huge tech person. So what I did instead was I sat down and I just started typing every morning for 30 minutes to an hour to kind of document a lot of the pieces and steps and thinking behind the decisions that we made to move towards financial independence. And the reason I did that is because my wife is involved in everything. She's engaged in everything. We talk about everything, but she doesn't know how to click the buttons. And if you asked her what a Roth conversion ladder was, she might possibly fumble her way a third of the way there. But it's just all that to say, it's just very much my thing. And I just want to make sure that as someone who grew up the way that I grew up, I didn't want my son to ever think that he just woke up and that's the way life was. I want him to understand what went into getting to where we are. And then I actually didn't mention this in my trailer or on follow-up episodes, but a friend of mine named DJ, who was on a 2-part episode with me, I'm going to see him tomorrow night and I got to make sure I tell him this. He had started a podcast at one point because he wanted his boys to know what his voice sounded like, just in case he ever wasn't around. And it's like the sweetest thing ever. I see the look on your face and now you're kind of crushing me. So if I ever wasn't around, now not only does my son have this, 100,000 written words of how we got to where we are, but he's got my voice during this phase of our life, thinking through out loud a lot of the decisions that we made and an idea of how we think about life. So it was a passion project for him. That's where the heart and soul of it comes from. If I ever monetize it, great. But here's what's funny. If you ever talk to anybody who's podcasting or blogging or whatever, if you talk to anybody who's kind of got it together and has won the game of podcasting, they'll often tell you as soon as you start making it for someone else, it becomes inauthentic and it won't work. And so if you make it for you and you stay authentic, there's a good chance it's going to work. And so I'm just doing my thing, my way, and hoping that enough people are interested in hearing the way that I think or the way my friends think or the way I ask questions to people that it could eventually become monetized, and so be it. But it's not at all a part of my FI plan. I assume it's going to make $0 ever. And if it does, I hope you're the first dollar. So there you go.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. And I'm not crying. You're crying. That's such a great thing though, that I just wanted my son to have a record of my voice. And now it's out there in the public that if I'm ever not around, there it is. I love that. I never even thought about something like that. And it's not even just for your son, it's for all your loved ones, that if you were to pass away, then they have a record of everything that you've done because it's recorded and out there in public. So I love that. And that's going to be part of my motivation for my podcast too. And yeah, I go back and forth with the monetization thing. And the only reason why I would want to monetize is to make the podcast better. Because for me, it's funny that you said, if you make it for yourself, it's better than making it for other people. But I am kind of making this for other people because I'm making it for the community. But it is for me too. I knew that I wanted to hear more stories of everyday people. And I was like, if I want to hear more stories, then other people want to hear more stories. And so that's why I'm doing it. But I also want to monetize. So it's better because it's just me behind the scenes, editing, recording, planning, scheduling. And it's a lot.
Yeah, you're dead on. And here's what I'll tell you. Every time I hear you say what you just said, which is why you're making it for the community, because you go to these events and you hear people say, I want to hear more stories. One, I know you're not wrong because I hear those things too. And two, I know you're not wrong because if you're in the Bigger Pockets money community, they regularly on their Facebook feeds, you'll see somebody say, when's Finance Friday coming back? We want to hear more stories. And it's just, I don't know if we've run out of people who are willing to air their financial independence. I was going to say dirty laundry, but maybe it's clean laundry. Anyway, maybe we've just run out of people that are interested in sharing their stories. I don't really know, but people are dying for that. But what I mean when I say if you make it for someone else, what I really should say is if you're making it for the reels to get those clicks, that clickbaity stuff. So you and I prepped, right? There's some prep that's done here. We made sure that I knew where you were wanting to go with questions and you know where I might move with answers. But never did we get together and say, hey, listen to this one-liner. If we drop this one-liner, then I can put the text across a reel and it's going to hit so well on my Latte Money page. I'm going to get so many clicks, right? We don't do that. We're not sitting around trying to figure that out. That's where you end up becoming scummy, slimy, or whatever-y. So that's what I mean by if you do it for the clicks, I think it's going to come across that way.
The funny thing is that I do sometimes take little screenshots and put it on my Instagram, but it's more to say, hey, look, I recorded a podcast. It was really fun. So I think it's funny that you said that. I promise it's not for the clicks.
You.
Yeah.
You
outed me
today. Yeah.
You outed me. No, yeah, I'm having a great time. And it's so funny that you mentioned, did the Bigger Pockets, what did you call it? The Friday?
Finance Friday.
The Finance Friday on Bigger Pockets, that maybe we've run out of people who want to tell their story. I am deathly afraid of that, but I keep getting interest. And part of what I am planning on doing is just trying to go to more FI events and get more people who are volunteers. And so if anybody out there is listening, I have a submission form on my website. It's going to be linked in the show notes where you can go and submit a request to be on the show, to interview on the show, and you can be anonymous. So if you're worried about work finding out or even your family and friends finding out, I can make you anonymous. You can use a pseudonym of whatever choice that you want, or I can create one for you, whatever you want to do. And nobody will ever know, but people really want to hear your story. And it doesn't matter if they know who you are. It's more that the story itself is really valuable. And there's a lot of nuggets of just wisdom and truth and learning that everybody has. So yeah, cool. So, okay, let's get back to your post-FI life a little bit. There's a couple other questions in that I kind of like to ask. And I really like the one about like, what would just a random Tuesday look like for you? And let's envision this is like after you've reached that 3%, withdrawal rate and you're actually completely done working. And it's after that 3 years that you've been kind of like getting to that fat FI number.
I think the right answer is slow down. And I really believe, even though it sounds funny when I say technically whatever it is, 3 months from now, I am probably financially independent, give or take a teensy bit because of a tax situation. But I have been slowing down. A year ago, I decided to invest less into my everyday and my career to just prepare to step back. And now I'm going on a sabbatical where we're going to go slow. I wish we were going slower, but we air quotes only have 3 months. I only have 3 months to travel this portion of the country, but we're 3 to 5 days at most of these campsites. And there's just something about that Tuesday morning, getting up whenever you feel like it. I currently set an alarm. I wake up before it some days. Some days I snooze it, but if I didn't have an alarm on, I bet you I would wake up 20 to 40 minutes later than I do on average. I'm still going to get up and sip coffee right away like I do now, do some light reading, maybe work on any cleanup of my personal finance categorizing stuff that I do. But even something as simple, and I think I mentioned it earlier, French press coffee is so much better than a drip pot coffee. It's a non-negotiable fact. It's science. Even if it's not been proven, I promise you it's science. But it takes longer. And my stupid French press is a Le Creuset, so it's straight bougie, but it doesn't hold enough for my wife and I. So I have to make 2 of them. Or what we typically do is set the drip pot to make half of what we need, and then the French press makes the rest. But I think that's just the perfect answer of just going slower. The second piece that I'm kind of living out right now is I'm working more from home because I'm not working nearly as much. I'm not in the office engaging as much. So it's really nice to just have lunch with my wife every day. And we love eating breakfast for lunch. So having breakfast tacos or fried eggs and whatever is just the absolute best versus my normal packed lunch that I brought to work every day for the last 16 years. And so just having lunch with my wife. Now, my son, he's just finished first grade. If this was next year, I would envision myself saying, okay, he's off to school. It's 9 a.m. We either get done what needs to get done around the house on Monday, Tuesdays, but maybe Wednesday is a day trip day. And we go see some part of our city or some corner of a county park that we've never been to and just go explore, wander about, just stuff like that. And I think I mentioned this in one of my first podcast episodes. I have this ridiculous saying called the lifestyle smoothie. There is just something to it to me about like going to your little downtown area, wherever you're like, ours is called the heart of the city, and going to some shop that sells a smoothie and just walking around and looking at your town slowly and sipping on a smoothie, enjoying that. Other stuff, I used to cross country ski. I think I would add that back in the wintertime. I think I'd get more back into ice fishing. I see all my ice fishing gear sitting up top at my house. I haven't used it, mainly because my son was born and he was too small and just never got back in the habit. But just when I was at the Fire in Las Vegas event, sitting around that table, and we were doing the sticky note exercise that you and I both love so much. One of the guys at my table was 3 to 4 years away from FI, and he's scared of this question. And he just didn't know what he was going to do. And I'm going to take my own advice here and just say, I put on the sticky note for him, and I felt really good when I said it. What did you do when you were 16, 17, 18 that you love, but you stopped doing when you were 21 because you were a big kid now? And for me, that was skateboarding and snowboarding and wakeboarding and fishing and ice fishing, because I became a real adult and I was supposed to be producing and doing all these other things. And so I think I'll just fall back in love with the stuff that I loved way back then. So I feel like I finally have answered your question, which means if you're satisfied, that means you're a great interviewer. Good job dragging it out of me.
Yeah, I like dragging answers out of people. No, that was great. And I mean, that is a fear that a lot of people have, whether you're early retiring or, retiring at a traditional age. There's so much tied to your job, your identity, your time. especially for early retirees, a lot of your friends or your family are still working. And so it can also become lonely after you retire. And so I can understand the fear kind of around that. And I think there's a lot in this community where people talk about really the thing you need to do before you retire, before you pull that trigger, is plan what you want to do. And it doesn't have to be like you plan your entire life for the next 50 years after you retire. Of course not. But it's more just like, okay, let's look at just a typical week and what is that going to look like? Okay, let's look at like a month. Let's look at a year. And just having that plan will give you an anchor to grab hold of after you retire. But I feel like a lot of people that I talk to who already retire, they're like, I'm more busy now than when I had a job. I've heard them say, I don't even know how I had a job. How did I fit 40 hours a week into my life? I don't know. And a lot of that is because people, after they retire, they do less of other things and more of some other things. And so that's actually one of my questions is like, what would you do more of post-FI and less of post-FI than what you're doing now? And I think you answered some of that, but is there anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I miss that I would do more of for sure is travel. And part of my new job role that I kind of made an agreement with my boss CEO about was I was only willing to travel for the role because two things. One, it was only 3 days a month and it was all at once. So I will fly to a major market, visit with a franchise location, help them out. Part two of that was, and I will often be taking PTO the day before, after, and maybe several days after. You are going to see my wife and son in photos on Facebook, and no, I don't want to hear about it. It was very important to me to be able to capitalize on that. And so in post-FI life, when I'm actually done, we love to travel. We really, really love to travel. So I would like to travel more slowly. Again, that phrase is going to keep coming up. Travel more slowly, experience more. The challenge is I have a 7-year-old who's going to be 8. And so you can only do so much travel. But one of the things that we did after reading the book Die With Zero for probably the 4th time is we sat down and time bucketed our lives. And so I have a notepad on my phone and it has how old we are, how old my son is, and this list of places that we would like to go. And once you start naming places that you'd like to go visit or things you might want to do. So for me, it's places. For you, it might be skydiving versus bungee jumping. I don't know, right? Have 7 cats instead of 6. I have no clue what your life goals are, but it's bucketing all of that out and saying, when do I want to go and see Europe? Do I want to see it with my son or not? If I do want to see it with him, do I want to see it with him at 8 years old or 14 years old, and figuring and mapping all of that out? And we did all that. And then the other thing is, like deep into my FI life, what I'm going to do more of, I'm going to buy my kids love as much as I possibly can. Maybe not his love, but buy his attention. I'm going to buy his attention and his time, not his love. So we've talked a lot about this. When he's post-college, he's going to want to be out living his life. But if he's living on a average or below average income getting started, that can be challenging. And you don't always get to go and do an all-inclusive trip to Mexico or go to Europe or something. And so we've just said we absolutely plan on buying his time and energy by taking him with us. And if that means I have to pay for his best friend or a girlfriend, done deal. All that matters is to me is that I can buy my time back with him, because I know what that time with my son looks like once he hits 18, and it goes dramatically down. And so I just want to be the parent that he wants to be around. And as much as I can do that, great. And if I got to buy his love, so be it. And last thing I'll say on my soapbox, I can tell you this works because somebody that works on my team was freaking out because she has twins, and that's all she had. She had her twins, and then they were done having children. And so it was great because everything was the same. They, were growing up at the same rate, all that stuff. But then it got to the year they were going to go to college, and she went into meltdown mode, absolute meltdown mode. She's like, this isn't fair. Normally, if you have 2 kids, one goes, and then the other one doesn't go to college until a year or 2 or 3 later. This is unfair. And I told her, I said, you make enough money. I've seen your paychecks. Buy their love. Show up in their college town once every 3 months, rent a sick Airbnb, invite all of their friends, pay for everything. And every 3 months, you'll get to see them that way. And then they come home for 2 or 3 holidays. And it's going to be like a win-win situation. You get an empty, clean, and quiet house. And then you get them on your terms when you want them. And she took me up on that advice. And it is unbelievable. She does it every quarter. And it's so funny to see these pictures and watch them have a blast. And so I kind of play tested it through somebody else. And I'm just going to go do it when my time comes, which is like 11 years away, which I'm thinking it's somewhere around 4,000 days, but who's counting? I've got time.
You sound like Brad, who actually does have like a countdown to when I think his oldest daughter goes to college or something like that, which I'm like, that's so like, I get why you're doing that, but it's also like a little scary. It's almost ominous, like having this countdown. But I get why he's saying that because I forget which book he references that says you only get so many hours with your kids or your parents if you don't have kids yet. And you spend most of the time with them when they're 18. And then after that, the time that you spend with them drops dramatically, especially if they go out of state for college and then don't necessarily return. I know that for me, for instance, like I haven't seen my dad in years because he lives in another state. And, I still love him. We still have a good relationship, but it just hasn't worked out to be able to see him. And I know that, so he's 77. And I have very limited time to go see him. And so one thing that I am planning on doing is making an effort to go down and see them. And unfortunately, they can't see us because if you think 6 cats is a lot, they have like 20 because they live like out in the country and they're all outdoor cats. And they just had 2 of their female cats have kittens. So they have like 20 cats. So they can't leave them behind. So they can't go and visit me. So I'm trying to make it a priority to go down and see them. And plus my partner who I've been with for 3 years has never met my dad. Like, I think that probably needs to happen. We're living together now and about to get married. So at some point when he asks me, hint, if you're listening, Chris.
One, Chris maybe thinks that you're hiding him from your dad, but now you've come out and said it's really, it's somebody else's fault. Second thing, I don't know if it's a book that Brad references. I think it's called The Tail End, which may be a blog. I'll let you look that up. And if it's accurate, you can keep this in and you can throw it in the show notes if it works. I like that you're thinking about going to see your dad. And I would just challenge you as a friend who knows that you're someone who mostly works from home in her pajamas all day because you declared that on my podcast episode number 2. I would challenge you to go and do that from your dad's house as long as he has reliable Wi-Fi since you're a software worker and you can probably figure it out remotely. So go do it.
Yeah, for sure. We are definitely planning on doing that this year. We'll just drive down there and hang out. And working or not working, he'd probably love watching me work. He'd probably love that.
Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Do you want to learn how to set powerful goals and invest wisely? Have you been yearning to quit your 9-to-5? Then my workbook, Your Journey to Freedom, is for you. This workbook is your roadmap to financial success. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, it's designed to help you define your goals, create a plan, and take action towards building wealth. Inside, you'll find practical exercises and tools that will help you identify your short, medium, and long-term financial goals, develop a personalized investment strategy tailored to these goals and your risk tolerance, track your progress and stay accountable to your financial objectives. Plus, there's bonus content like a quiz to test what you learn and a budget worksheet. With easy-to-follow instructions and insightful prompts, this workbook will empower you to make confident decisions and stay focused on your financial journey. Don't let another day go by without taking charge of your financial life. Invest in yourself and your future with the Your Journey to Freedom workbook. Order now and start turning your dreams into reality. Visit my website at everyday-fi.com/guides to get your copy today and start your journey to financial freedom.
Okay, so I want to back up a little bit to when you were talking about slowing things down and having these mornings and drinking your bougie coffee, because there's this quote that I really love where it goes, "Mornings are for coffee and contemplation, and I too am a French press lover." And that quote is, you guys are going to laugh, it's from the first episode of the Stranger Things TV show, and Chief Hopper says it when his assistant is trying to get him to work and he doesn't want to work. And he says, "Mornings are for coffee and contemplation." And I'm like, that is like straight to my heart. That's exactly how I feel about that. So I wanted to just loop that back in because I couldn't let it go. And then also when you talked about slowing down with travel, I want to hear more about your sabbatical. Like, what do you plan on doing? How did the plans come about? Who kind of took charge with that? Was it you and your wife together? Or did you say, "I want to go do this"? And your wife was like, "Yeah, let's do it." Give me details.
So we've been a camping family, a camping couple for as long as we've been together, basically. And I grew up tent camping. My aunt and uncle had like an RV. And so wherever they would go, we would often follow and just set a tent up outside their RV and then be the benefactors of their stove and toilet and all that stuff. And so we grew up camping. And then when we became adults, I restarted camping again after I was done with college. And as we were getting married, and it was just really funny for our wedding, when you register, gosh, I was thinking of the word, when you register for your wedding, we registered for like a third of our stuff was camping item. And so we had all this great stuff. We wanted to put it to use and we camped ever since. And then the last few years, we've gone on some more, larger camping trips. So we went to the Smoky Mountains and we've done some more, I guess they're not huge trips, but longer, and they're further away and they're with other families and just doing more hiking and whatnot. And then back to Die with Zero, we read the book, we're time bucketing it. And somewhere in history, we had said, oh, it'd be awesome to take a break from work and do the classic RV trip around the country. That would be so cool. And when we started doing the time bucketing thing, the funny part is Liz and I were walking down the street and I just said, hey, I read this book again. It talks about this time bucket concept and I laid it out for her. And she goes, normally she's kind of like, oh, great, you read another book. Now what? And this time it was, get your phone out. Let's go. And the first item on her list was this, the RV trip across the country. And so I always thought it was my thing that she was semi-begrudgingly interested in, but it turns out it was very much deeply both of our things. So that's how it came about. The planning fell in her court for a couple of reasons. One, she got laid off back in December. We made the decision right around Christmas time that this was going to be the year that I tapped out and was done with work. So she had a lot of time on her hands. So she took the reins, mapping out and planning and organizing the trip, and had a ton of time on her hand and would, hit me when she needed an opinion or this site versus that site. Do we want to stay closer? Do we want to stay farther? What do we want to do? But she did most of the work. And so it's all these campsites are figured out and the itinerary in each area is fairly open. There's some must do's, but there's flexibility for us to learn from either the locals or the campsites or the park rangers or whatever we come across to make sure that we aren't rigid on what we want to do. We're open to what we're told we should do once we're there.
That sounds like a great time. And so did you buy your RV? Are you renting it or how's that working?
We bought it last October when we didn't know if we were going to do this trip in a year, 2 years, 3 years. We truly didn't know. We just had been tent camping for a long time and decided, you know what, we're ready to move into a camper. We had rented a couple campers for a couple of bigger trips, one to Mount Rushmore, one to the Smoky Mountains. We'd had some experience staying in them and kind of had an idea of what we wanted. And then we decided, you know what, we've got the money, let's do this. And from the moment we decided to the day that we took ownership was probably under 30 days. and the moment I found the one that we bought to the moment I bought it was like 4 days. And I had to buy a vehicle to be able to pull in the same 4-day stretch. So it was very much hurry up and go. So yeah, we own it.
Nice. So are you going to own it forever so you can just do these long trips, or are you going to try and sell it back?
No, we're going to keep it. I think we'll have this for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. Whenever I do a big transaction like that, I like to believe that I'm going to hang on to it and get a lot of use out of it for at least, 3 to 5 years for any depreciation that I'm going to put on it. That to me, it's not just about the money. It's just, I think it's kind of lazy. And sometimes people just on a whim, go back to COVID. There's all these, they're known as COVID campers. So if you're looking to buy a camper, you don't want to buy a 2020 to 2023 model because all these people that have never camped before became campers because that's what you could do without wearing a mask. That was what you were allowed to do. So these manufacturers just started pumping out campers and none of them are built very well because they just had to get them done real fast. So for me, I want to make sure if I'm investing in something that I'm going to get a lot of good use out of it. I truly value it. And for us, that's that 3 to 5 year minimum range. And then you do a lot of work to these things to make them your own and to customize it. And, my wife makes it cute and all that stuff. And I do a lot of the stuff to make it safe and functional and as enjoyable for me to haul it around the country. So I want to get a lot of use out of it. So we'll keep it. And again, we identify as a camping family. So it's pretty simple that we're going to use it at least 3 to 4 times a year. And I'll say this one last thing and then I promise I'll shut up. Now that we own this thing going into next summer, so this summer 2024, next summer 2025, my hope is to find a place to park this at a campsite for the whole season. So it just sits there so that if we want to just run away for the weekend within an hour, drive an hour away, go stay at the camper. It's there. It's waiting. It's set up. It's good to go. It's not a whole thing. But if I want to pick it up and drag it somewhere, it's only an hour away for me to get it, set it up, take it here to my house, get it all set up, and let it go. Hello, cat number 1 of 6.
Yes, my cat just jumped on my chair, if anybody is wondering. Yeah, so that whole camper, park it away, and then you can go and camp whenever you want. It's like your vacation home on wheels. I kind of love that. And I also really appreciate that recommendation that you just told us, like, don't buy any campers that are between the years of 2020 and 2023 because they weren't very well manufactured, because they were trying to churn them out. So anybody listening who wants to buy a camper, maybe something from the 2019 to, 2018 years, maybe stick to that if you're looking for one that's newer. Cool. Oh my God, there's so much that I want to ask you, but we're already at like 56 minutes. So I'm going to move to what your current struggles are right now. And they don't have to be fire related. They can be whatever you want to talk about. But yeah, what are you kind of struggling with that you want to share with the community?
So probably the biggest struggle we've already talked a bit about, which is just this one more year syndrome. And I think I'm ahead of the game, which sounds funny to say out loud because you've challenged me a couple of times on this episode to be like, dude, just rip off the Band-Aid and be done. You're not saying it, but I know it's what you're thinking. I can sense it. And I'm sure some people in the audience are going to sense it too. The reality is if anybody out there is dealing with this one more year syndrome, which I truly don't think I am, because we're not at the 3% rule. That is a defined actual fact. So I'm not there yet. But when I am there, I think where I have a head start, and I hope a lot of people will have a head start. And going back to the guy who said he's 2 or 3 years away from pulling the trigger on his own, and I suggest that he goes and discovers what were you passionate about when you were 18 that you stopped doing, that you could go maybe reignite and get excited about again. When it comes to decoupling your identity from your work and your work accomplishments, I highly recommend you start doing that while you're still employed. Because if I can't imagine ripping the Band-Aid off and having given every ounce of what I had all the way up until this moment, and then tomorrow ripping the Band-Aid off and being like, see ya, I'm going camping for 3 months, I think my brain would explode. Instead, I started thinking differently about who I am at my core. Even how I introduce myself at parties. I stopped telling people when they ask me, oh, what are you up to? What do you do? I try and dodge that I was a vice president, part owner, operating partner, whatever. I tried to decouple from that for a good year to just get comfortable just being, hey, I'm a husband, I'm a father. We like to camp. We like to travel. These are some of the things that we're up to. I'm a personal finance junkie, things like that, instead of the VP title or whatever. So for me, it's just this combination of I did reach some version of job burnout, whatever you want to call it, right guy in the wrong seat. That was hard to accept. It was really, really tough to accept because I've worked really, really hard to get to where I am and where I've been. And so that was really tough for me. And then just kind of making this transition, letting everything go and saying goodbye to my team, the people that, part of me feels like I'm abandoning them a little bit, even though they're equipped, they're capable, they're great people. The good news is after I told them all, it was kind of like going to my own funeral. Honestly, they were all just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're leaving you. And they had all these great things to say. And then about a week and a half later, they all got raises and promotions. And they're like, hey, thank you so much for leaving. And so that is kind of helping me a little bit as I move on. So I hope that answers your question about kind of what some of my struggles are. And I think I'm better prepared to face one more year syndrome than maybe your facial expressions will give me credit for as we recorded this interview.
I think you're reading too much into it. I definitely don't think you need to pull any triggers that you are not comfortable with. And I think the one more year syndrome is definitely very common. I know that my mom, who is traditionally retiring, her retirement party is actually next week. She was going to keep working. I mean, every time she would say, oh, I'm so ready to retire. And I would say, well, you have the money to do it. Why don't you do it right now? Well, because I want to redo my kitchen, because I want to buy a new car soon, because I want to do this, because I want to do this. And so she felt kind of those golden handcuffs to her job because she had like a 50% bonus that she would get every year. And she had a really hard time letting it go. And it wasn't just because like she was a CFO. I mean, that was part of it. I mean, that's a big title to have. And it was part of her identity. But she basically was forced to retire because she works at Berkshire Hathaway Carolinas, the real estate company. And as many of you might know, they were part of that lawsuit and had to pay out some money. And basically they laid off a lot of their CFOs. So she just was like, I guess this is the year I'm retiring. So she was kind of forced into it. And the reason why I bring that up is because, if you are able to retire and you have that one more year syndrome, that's a great place to be, because there are some people who are just forced into retirement when they're not even ready yet. I know that she has one woman who worked for her who had zero retirement savings, is 62 years old and will not be able to find another job. At least she doesn't think so. And so she has to live on Social Security only, and she has to start taking it at 62. And that's where I don't think anybody in our group is going to be there. But I think my point is basically, if you have the 1 year syndrome, you're in a very privileged position. And I would give yourself more credit that it's okay. It's okay to be like that. It is very scary. And you never know if your money is really going to last forever. I mean, you can model it out all you want, but it's all based on past performances. And we all know past performance is not indicative of future performance. So
accurate.
Yeah.
Accurate. Yeah. I think part of my 1 year syndrome will be there's a need for purpose, whether it's I'm retired and I need this purpose, or I'm working and it needs to fulfill my purpose. Because I am in a place of privilege now where I chose to not work anymore because it wasn't fulfilling my purpose. And what I'm going to do next, I think, is going to be very purpose-filled work. And it might be hard for me to want to leave that. And so I may be in a situation where I'm not living out 1 more year syndrome. I'm choosing to work because I'm really helping people out and it's great. My son's in school, so it's not like I can travel everywhere all the time as much as I want, right? I won't be able to. I can only travel so much, but I will be traveling for work, and I can yank my wife with me here and there, and I can take my son with me here and there. And I just told somebody this the other day, this guy, Brandon, who is on my podcast and will release sometime in the next couple of weeks. I told him, I said, with this new gig that I have, it's pretty awesome. I'm going to be able to save, my backdoor Roth IRA. I'm going to take the 401k match. I don't even know if I'm going to max out my 401k anymore. I think I'm just going to blow the rest and literally just have a blast with it and literally just spend it all. Yeah, just spend it all and let my nest egg take care of itself. And that is a privileged spot to be. Let me tell you, that's an awesome spot to be.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to, what are your current wins right now besides blowing all your new money?
Well, I am kind of jokingly calling my whole situation like the ultimate Houdini. And I don't know how I pulled it off other than being a really good employee who built a really nice business that had a great opportunity and took advantage of it, and then decided it wasn't right for me, and was able to very honestly and affectionately share how appreciative I was for everything that I had been given and every opportunity that I had, and was very honest about what I'd done with it and why I was in this position. I mean, they understand that I'm there because I want to be. And I told them very clearly, if I take a job with you in the future, it's going to be because I want to be there. And if I don't want to be there, I'm just going to say no. It's that simple. And that is a huge win because I'm truly going to work on my terms. And I came away with a really nice income out of the deal. It was a little bit more than I was expecting to be making for the role. And I'm just so thankful. I'm so blessed. I've got a wonderful kid that's 7 years old. He's a delight of a child. He's inclusive to friends and family, and neighbors love him. And adults always tell me how wonderful he is to be around. My wife and I have a great relationship. We go on walks. We like to eat the same foods and celebrate heavily, whether it's birthdays or holidays or whatever. And those are all wins. That's a great place to be. But all of that was intentional and by design over a long period of time. And it's just cool to look at it and say, it all came together in just 16 short years of really hard work for this company, and the 3 years at the company before that, where I kind of got my career start. So those are my wins. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it does for sure. And that's awesome. I'm so happy for you. And I'm so glad that you have such great relationships with your family. I mean, that's what a lot of us are really wanting at the end of the day, right? Relationships are the number one thing that will, carry you forward and give you purpose outside of a job. So I love that you already have that. And I think your FI life is going to be awesome. We're coming to the end of our time. So I want to hear from you a life hack, recommendation, or learning that you'd like to share with the community.
Yeah, this is not a shameful plug for you or for me, but I am such a fan of audio learning because it just allows us to compound our time. you only have so much time to sit down and read a book. And I know that some people struggle to learn in the audio format, but I would challenge you to try it more than maybe what you have before you've given up, and just see if you can't take some away, because you and I both have said the same thing. We listen to podcasts and audiobooks when we're cutting the grass, when we're gardening, in your case, cooking, cleaning the house, whatever it is, we're listening to podcasts. And I think it was Ziegler who said to turn your vehicle into a mobile university. Like, podcasts didn't invent the ability to learn on the move. Books on tape did. And before that, maybe even books on 8-track for the older audience that might be out there. But I'm going to give you one other option that when I read this question in prep, I didn't think of this until just now. If you really can't come to the point where learning through audio is your thing, I'm going to give shout out and props to a friend of mine that I met through a ChooseFI meetup. Her name's Laura. I met her and her wife through a ChooseFI meetup, and I just went and had coffee with them a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about solar power. But the reason I bring her up is Laura wasn't interested in all of this stuff. She was motivated by the end result, but didn't care about the mechanics and the stuff. And her wife, Amanda, was really engaged in this stuff. She was completely geeked out about it. And my understanding is Laura tried to listen to podcasts. She tried to read the books, and it just wasn't her thing. So instead, she showed up to a ChooseFI meeting to say, this is who I am. This is what my deal is. Can I learn from you? So if that's a barrier for you, that audio learning isn't your thing, or you don't have the time to sit down and read the book, what if you just went and stuck yourself in a room surrounded by people who care about this stuff? And I've been in these rooms. 15% of the people, 20% of the people there, they're like day one. Hey, I heard about this and I just want to learn from you. 20 to 30% are somewhere in the middle. And then the rest are, nerds like Megan and I that have dove so deep into this stuff that like we're the weird ones. So that would be one thing. And the other thing I would mention, another hack, is what we allow into our lives can either help elevate us or bring us backwards or bring us down. And so I think social media has such a strong hold on us, and I'm just as guilty as anyone. I love to scroll Facebook, and I don't have Instagram, but I know all these tools are out there, but they're only tools if you make them tools. So for me, I make an effort to actively turn off ads that aren't serving me or distracting me, and turn on the things that I want to see come to my feed. So I'm in the ChooseFI groups. I'm in the Bigger Pockets groups for real estate and the Bigger Pockets money groups, so that these subjects are on the forefront, so that when I'm doom scrolling, I might learn something and I might be able to help somebody out, dare I say, answer their actual question. And so surrounding yourself by the things that you want to see can make it so much easier to take these concepts in and understand them. And the last thing I'll say in this subject is, part of the reason I say that is it's hard to find people that think this way, because we're not the normal ones. We're living outside the normal prescribed American dream, whatever you want to call it. And so it's hard to surround yourself with 5 or 6 people that you can learn from and grow from. And that's what ends up happening, is those who you surround yourself with, the 5 closest people to you, you are the average of those 5 people. And if we can't surround ourselves with 5 people like this regularly, then we got to go find them somewhere. And for me, it's the internet, and once a month, local ChooseFI meetups or some other kind of meetup that can help you grow and benefit and develop.
Yeah, that's really wise. And I will put a link in the show notes to the ChooseFI local groups page, where you can go and see if you can find a local group near you. If you're interested in learning more about this and you are not into podcasts, although why you're listening to this one, I don't know, but keep doing it. And I hear you for the social media. I am trying really hard not to doom scroll. I try to use it only for my business. I curate who I follow. I can't do anything about the ads because they're going to show no matter what. But I also heard a hack recently from, I forget who, but she put grayscale on her phone. And so everything just wasn't as, in her face and like capturing her. And she only used the apps that she needed at the moment, because I feel like some of the colors that social media apps or any apps use is they're using those colors to capture your interests in a very specific way. And there's actually been like studies done on certain colors, like promote certain feelings. I think this might be wrong now, but I think the McDonald's colors apparently promote like feelings of hunger. So, and so some of those like really bright social media colors just are there to kind of grab you and say, hey, look at me. And then also the little notification icons, I turn those off. I turn all the notifications off on all of my social media platforms, so that if I'm going on there, I don't know if I have a notification or not. I'm just going on there to, do some business or something like that. So yeah, that's a great hack. And thank you for sharing that. All right. So we're pretty much finished. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't covered so far?
One quick thing and one that's a little longer. So the quick one is on the notifications. I love that for your social media. In business, as someone who has run a very busy, fast-paced, nonstop business for a long time, one of my favorite things is I treat email the same way. I don't want the little bubble in the corner of Outlook that pops up and gives me that first sentence from you, and all of a sudden it's taken me away from my deep work. I don't want the ding on my computer, all of that. So I've set my phone in a manner as well where the only time my phone buzzes is if someone's calling me or texting me, and that's it. Actually, there's one other. If I'm physically supposed to drive to a meeting, then it will also buzz at me. But anyway, that's getting those micro distractions that take you away from your deep work out of the way is really powerful. And the last thing, I thought about this specifically for your show because your goal is everyday FI, to talk to normal, everyday people. And I was teaching this personal finance class at my church, and I wanted to make sure that my situation remained as relatable as possible because I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't seem as relatable when you hear that I have a stock equity event coming in the next 90 days. That's not normal for everybody, right? It doesn't feel as approachable. So I just want to make sure that for anybody listening, I hope my story remains relatable from the fact that, man, I graduated high school with like a 2.2 GPA. I went to college for 2 years and dropped out because I hated it. It wasn't the right thing for me. I chose to bet on myself in sales and management. And then I grinded and worked a little bit harder and put in a little bit more time than the people next to me. And I continued to grow and develop and grow and develop and grow and develop and found myself getting promoted and earning more and more and more. And the last piece to staying relatable is if it wasn't for this windfall, I'm still well past half FI. And so I would still be early retired in well under a decade from today. This is just accelerating it a whole lot quicker. And I don't want to hide from that, but I want to make sure, if at all possible, this stays relatable to anybody listening. So that's really all I've got. And I hope it's helpful. And I thank you again for bringing me on. And I thank you again for doing my second ever episode with me. And I look forward to getting you back on my show for your own real interview. We got to get to it, but I got to travel. And then you're going to try and drag me back to yours for round 2 before we even get to you on mine. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely am going to drag you back. And just a note, you might not think that you're relatable, but I think that you are definitely aspirational. So even if somebody might not relate directly to what you have going on right now, it's something they can aspire to. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. How can people find you if they want to learn more or hear more from you or just hit you up with a question?
MyFICapsule. I wish it was a little bit easy to hear in your head, but it's literally MyFICapsule. So My Financial Independence Capsule. Think of it kind of like a time capsule. If you Google that, you'll find it. It's on all the different podcast platforms. You can find it there. But also, if you want to email me, you can literally email myficapsule@gmail.com. Go ahead and I look and I answer anything that comes in. I do have a real domain, but I don't like managing the email platform. So I stuck with the Gmail one just because it's way easier to manage and I'm really lazy in all the right ways. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share that.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Everyday FI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, everyday-fi.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfipodcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.